Danielle Harris woke up before sunrise, the soft light of early morning spilling through her bedroom window. She sat on the edge of her bed and took a deep breath. Today was a day she had dreamed about for years. As the founder and CEO of NovaPay, a small financial technology company, she felt both excitement and a steady calm in her chest. She knew that by the end of the day, her life could change forever. She began her morning with a routine that grounded her. In the quiet of her kitchen, she poured a cup of black coffee and let the rich aroma fill her senses. She opened her laptop at the small dining table and glanced over last-minute notes for her meeting. Each bullet point reminded her of the journey she had taken to reach this point. She remembered late nights, coding the first prototype of NovaPay's payment app. She remembered phone calls with early investors who believed in her vision. She remembered doubt and struggle, but also moments of hope when everything clicked into place. After coffee, she moved to her home office. A wall of framed degrees and awards greeted her. The certificates marked milestones. Her finance degree from a top university, an award for innovation in financial services, and letters of thanks from clients whose livelihoods NovaPay had made easier. She smoothed out her teal blazer on the back of her chair and placed her CEO badge on the desk beside her presentation folder. The badge was metal and heavy in her hand, a symbol of her authority and her hard work. Danielle reviewed her schedule one more time. She had a 1-hour slot at the main Crestcore Bank branch downtown. There, she would finalize a $2 billion credit line that would allow NovaPay to expand into new markets across 3 continents. She pictured the faces of her small team back at headquarters. They had built the company from scratch. Each person was passionate and dedicated. The funding would mean hiring dozens of new engineers, customer support staff, and marketing experts. It would transform NovaPay from a local success into a global player. She stood up, stretched, and decided to dress for confidence. She chose a fitted navy skirt and a crisp white blouse. Her hair, pulled back into a neat bun, framed her strong features. She applied a light touch of makeup, just enough to feel polished. She slipped her feet into low-heeled shoes that clicked softly on her hardwood floor as she walked. Before leaving, she reached into her bag and made sure her credentials were secure. Her government ID, her CEO badge, and a small leather notebook, where she had sketched the bank's proposed partnership terms in her own handwriting. The drive to the Crestcore branch was smooth. The sun had risen fully by the time Danielle's car pulled up in front of the grand building. It stood tall with glass windows reflecting the city's skyline. Flags fluttered near the entrance. She parked and stepped out, feeling the gentle warmth of the morning sun on her face. Around her, people in business attire stepped in and out of the building. The air buzzed with the quiet energy of commerce. Inside the bank, the lobby was bright and modern. Marble floors stretched underfoot, and potted plants lent a touch of green to the open space. Soft music played over hidden speakers. A row of tellers sat behind a long counter, each separated by small plexiglass screens. Comfortable chairs lined up for customers waiting their turn. Danielle joined the line, her heart beating just a fraction faster than usual. She checked her appearance one last time in the reflective glass of a countertop divider. She felt ready. When she reached the front of the line, she smiled at the teller, a young man with neatly combed hair and a pressed uniform. His name tag read Mark. Danielle greeted him warmly, handed him the appointment letter from Crestcore's regional vice president, and then offered her ID and CEO badge. Mark took the items, glanced at them, and then said, "Please wait here while I verify your credentials." His tone was polite but distant. Danielle watched Mark place her items on the counter. Then, rather than lay them gently, he gave them a sharp flick. Her badge and ID card flew across the polished surface and clattered onto the floor. The sound echoed in the lobby, drawing curious looks from other customers. Danielle's breath caught in her throat. Time seemed to slow for a moment. Mark turned away, his back to her, as though the ID and badge were nothing more than scraps of paper. For a heartbeat, Danielle considered staying silent. Yet she felt something rise inside her, a mix of shock and resolve. She gently leaned down to pick up her credentials. Her fingers trembled just a little when she touched the cold metal of her badge. She straightened up, her posture firm. She met Mark's eyes and spoke in a steady voice. "I would appreciate it if you would treat my credentials with respect. I'm here as the CEO of NovaPay." Other customers shifted in their chairs. A middle-aged woman glanced at her husband and nodded slightly. A young man reading a report looked up in curiosity. Mark's expression changed from indifference to surprise. He cleared his throat and said, "I apologize, ma'am. I'm verifying your ID now." He picked up her badge and license with a sense of caution, as though her words had reminded him of a basic rule of courtesy. Danielle nodded and offered a small, controlled smile. She placed her portfolio on the counter in front of her. She had rehearsed everything she would say in the conference room just beyond the lobby. She told herself not to let this moment shake her focus. Instead, she let it remind her why she was here to secure a future for NovaPay, and for all the pay. People who believed in her vision. As Mark worked, Danielle looked around the lobby once more. She noted the diversity of faces and backgrounds, each person here for their own reasons. She thought about the employees at NovaPay who counted on her leadership. She thought about the customers who used her app to send money to their families overseas. She thought about the investors who took risks on her idea and watched as it turned into a company that had real impact in everyday lives. Her phone buzzed quietly in her purse. A quick glance at the screen showed a message from her chief operating officer. "Good luck, Danielle. We are all behind you." She felt a warm sense of support. She slipped the phone back into her bag and took a calming breath. Whatever happened next, she knew she would handle it with dignity and strength. Mark finally finished typing and tapped on his screen. He slid her ID and badge back across the counter. Danielle accepted them and tucked them carefully into her wallet. She did not glare or make a scene. She simply said, "Thank you," and turned to walk toward the conference rooms at the back of the lobby. Each step she took felt lighter, as though speaking up had released something heavy from inside her. At the door to the meeting room, she paused and straightened her shoulders one more time. She looked into the room where the regional vice president and other bank executives waited. Their faces were polite and expectant. Danielle took a final breath and stepped inside, ready to continue her story. She was determined that respect, fairness, and her own worth would guide every word she spoke. And as the door closed softly behind her, she carried with her the memory of that small act of defiance and the knowledge that she would not let anyone throw her dignity on the floor again. Danielle stepped into the bright conference room and felt the smooth click of the door behind her. The long table of polished wood stretched before her, and around it sat 4 bank executives in crisp suits. At the head of the table sat Lawrence Kim, the regional vice president, whose kind eyes had first invited her to this meeting. To his right, a woman with glasses tapped a pen against her notebook. To his left, a man in a dark tie glanced at Danielle's portfolio with polite interest. Behind them sat an assistant taking notes on a laptop. Danielle offered a calm smile, setting her portfolio on the table. "Thank you for meeting with me," she said. Her voice was clear and steady. "I am ready to finalize the partnership details for NovaPay's expansion." She felt the familiar rush of confidence she always relied on when speaking to investors. She adjusted her teal silk scarf and reached for the presentation remote in her bag. Lawrence returned. Her smile and gestured to a large screen on the wall. Welcome, Danielle. We appreciate your leadership at NovaPay. Please walk us through your final proposal. He spoke gently, but Danielle sensed his curiosity about the earlier incident in the lobby. She chose to begin with the facts and her vision rather than the emotions. She clicked the remote. The first slide appeared with NovaPay's logo and a world map. Over the past 3 years, she began, NovaPay has served 5 million customers across 2 countries. Our technology has reduced transaction fees by 40% and cut processing times in half. With your support, we plan to expand into 10 more countries by next year. She spoke with energy, her words painting a clear picture of possibility. The next slide, she showed growth charts rising steadily upward. She explained how the $2 billion line of credit from Crestcore would fuel server upgrades, regional offices, and a new customer support center. She spoke of partnerships with local banks in emerging markets, and how NovaPay's inclusive design had won praise from community leaders. The executives listened, their faces attentive. Halfway through her presentation, Lawrence paused the slides. Your numbers are impressive, he said. But I have one question. After what happened in the lobby, how confident are you that Crestcore Bank and NovaPay can maintain mutual respect? We want this partnership to reflect our values. He looked at her intently, as though wanting to see both her answer and her resolve. Danielle held his gaze. She spoke without hesitation. I believe respect is earned through actions, she said. I spoke up when I felt disrespected. That moment reminded me, and everyone there, that dignity matters more than procedure. Now, here in this room, I trust we can move forward with open communication and shared goals. NovaPay values integrity. We will hold ourselves accountable and expect our partners to do the same. Her words were simple but carried weight. The woman with the pen nodded. Slowly, that is good to hear, she said. We want to stand by your side. Yet I must ask, did you feel your concerns were addressed adequately after the lobby incident? She sounded kind but firm, probing to understand if Danielle still harbored anger. Danielle took a breath. She chose honesty. The teller apologized in the moment, but the branch manager did not reach out to me afterward. I received no follow-up call or email. That silence felt like a second slight. She paused so they could absorb her words. I understand mistakes happen, but I need to know that Crestcore will back its apology with action, that you will treat all clients, regardless of background, with respect. Her gaze moved around the table, and she spoke not with accusation but with clarity. A man in a navy suit cleared his throat. I apologize on behalf of Crestcore for our lack of follow-up, he said. I was not present that morning. I assure you, discrimination is not our policy. Still, I can see how it felt dismissive. If you choose to partner with us, I will personally oversee client relations to ensure every concern is heard. His voice was warm and his words sincere. Danielle felt a flicker of relief. She nodded. Thank you. That commitment means a lot to me. She clicked to the next slide, moving on to a summary of terms, interest rates, collateral requirements, draw schedules. She explained each point clearly. As she spoke, she watched the executives take notes and exchange occasional glances. Towards the end, Lawrence leaned back. Everything seems in order, he said. We will send the final contract by tomorrow. Let me know if you have any questions. He stood and offered his hand. Danielle stood too and shook it. I look forward to our work together, she said. She gathered her portfolio and left the room. As she walked through the hallway back to the lobby, she replayed every moment in her mind. The meeting had gone well, but she wondered if her mention of the lobby incident had left a mark on their willingness to finalize. She tried not to let worry creep in, but the silence in the lobby felt heavier now. Back in the lobby, the tellers had moved on to other customers. The chairs were mostly empty. Danielle paused by a potted plant and took a steadying breath. She reminded herself of her purpose and why she had chosen to stand up for respect. She pictured her team at Nova Pay, headquarters eagerly awaiting news of the approved credit line. Her phone buzzed. It was her chief operating officer again. How did it go? Any updates? Danielle typed a quick reply. Progress made. Terms look good. Final contract due tomorrow. She slipped the phone back and closed her eyes for a moment, imagining the future she had described in the meeting. She left the bank and felt the city air on her face. The sun was higher now, making the glass buildings gleam. Danielle walked to her car and reflected on the meeting. It had been smooth, but she knew that words spoken in a room did not guarantee action. She vowed to stay vigilant and to ensure that respect remained at the heart of the partnership. As she drove back to NovaPay's headquarters, she thought about what part 3 of her journey would bring. Would Crestcore keep its promise? Would the contract arrive as planned? She reminded herself that sometimes the most important work happens after the handshake, in the follow-up, in the daily interactions, and in the choices made when no one is watching. By the time she reached the office, her mind was already shifting to the next steps, preparing her legal team to review the contract, planning a press statement to announce the partnership, and sharing the good news with her staff. She felt a quiet pride. She had carried herself with dignity, defended her worth, and kept her focus on the bigger vision. Inside the lobby of her own building, NovaPay employees greeted her with smiles. Her executive assistant handed her a coffee and said quietly, "Everyone is ready for the announcement when you are." Danielle returned the smile. "Great," she said. "Let's be ready to celebrate, but let's also be ready to ensure our values shape every action." She sipped the coffee and headed toward her corner office, ready for whatever came next. Danielle returned to NovaPay's headquarters feeling a sense of cautious hope. She had walked out of Crestcore's office believing that the $2 billion line of credit was all but guaranteed. But as hours turned into a full day, the silence from the bank grew heavy. She sat at her polished oak desk, the morning light casting long shadows across her papers. On her desk lay the draft press release, the initial contract copy she expected, and her neatly labeled folders of financial projections. Yet nothing new had come through. No signed agreement, no further questions, no follow-up email. Just the echo of empty inbox notifications and the weight of anticipation. She leaned back in her chair and rubbed her temples. She thought back to Mark's careless flick of her ID in the bank lobby. That moment had sparked a fire inside her, but Danielle had channeled her energy into the successful meeting that followed. Now, in the quiet stillness of her office, she wondered if that fire had burned the bridge instead of lighting the path forward. Her chief operating officer, James, knocked softly and stepped in. He carried 2 steaming cups of coffee. "Morning," he said, placing a cup beside her keyboard. "Did you get the contract?" Danielle shook her head. "Not yet." She took the coffee gratefully. The rich warmth spread through her chest. "I've sent a polite note asking for an update, but I haven't heard back," James frowned. "They said they'd send it by today?" "Yes." Danielle tapped her pen gently on the desk. "Lawrence said tomorrow, but I was expecting something by now. I'll follow up again in an hour." James leaned against the edge of the desk. "I know how big this is for us, but let's not panic. Crestcore is a big bank. Sometimes they move slowly." "I know," she said, then looked out the window at the city below. I just hate waiting. It feels like they're second-guessing us. Or worse, ignoring us. James nodded slowly. Your instincts are right. We can't afford to be ignored. Should we start looking at Plan B? Danielle sighed. We always have Plan B, but Plan B costs us more in interest, and it will delay our launch by months. Plan A is the best path. I want to believe they're just busy, that we need clarity. By tomorrow afternoon. James straightened. I'll have our legal team ready to review the contract as soon as it comes in. And I'll reach out to our other lenders discreetly, just in case. Danielle gave a small smile. Thank you. I trust you with that. She watched James leave her office, feeling the gentle pull of responsibility settle on her shoulders. It was her job to steer NovaPay through calm waters and stormy seas alike. She spent the next hour clicking through spreadsheets and adjusting bullet points on the press release. She imagined how the announcement would sound. NovaPay secures $2 billion partnership with Crestcore Bank to revolutionize international payments. She pictured the faces of her employees reading that statement and feeling proud. She pictured new hires celebrating their first day on the job. She pictured families overseas grateful for faster, cheaper transfers. All of it depended on a signature that had not yet appeared. Her phone buzzed with a text message. It was from the marketing director, Carla. Draft announcement looks good. Let me know when I can share it. Danielle typed back. Pending. Contract. Will update by end of day. She set the phone aside, then stood and walked to the whiteboard in her office. There, she had drawn a timeline of the next 3 months, with milestones for server deployments, office openings, and marketing campaigns. She circled the date for the press release in bold red marker. The circle looked too tight, too final. She erased it and redrew a lighter oval, leaving space on both sides in case the schedule shifted an hour later. She sent another email to Lawrence at Crestcore. It read, Dear Mr. Kim, I hope you are well. I wanted to follow up regarding the contract draft for our partnership. We are eager to move forward and would appreciate any update you can provide. Thank you, Danielle Harris. She clicked send and stared at the screen as if willing a reply to materialize. When none came, she closed her laptop and took a deep breath. By mid-afternoon, her inbox finally pinged. A new message from Crestcore's legal department appeared. Danielle's heart raced as she clicked it open. The subject line read simply, NovaPay Partnership. Inside was a single line. We regret to inform you that we are unable to proceed at this time. No explanation, no apology, no further discussion. Danielle felt her chest tighten. She reread the sentence, hoping her mind had played a trick, but the words stood stark and final. Her vision blurred for a moment. She gripped the desk edge too. Steady herself. How could they pull back now? After the respectful words in the meeting, after her clear expression of values, after she had trusted them. She closed her eyes and counted to 10. Breathing slowly, she reminded herself that she was not alone. NovaPay was more than one person, and its future would not hinge on one bank's whim. Danielle called James immediately. They just declined, she said, her voice calm but firm. No reason given. She forwarded the email to him. James appeared at her door moments later, concern etched on his face. I see. That is unexpected. He set down his phone and crossed to her desk. Should we ask for more details? Danielle shook her head. I don't think they'll tell us anything. They ended it. I need to think through our options. She tuned out the whisper of worry in her mind. She had faced more daunting challenges. This was a test of her resilience. She asked James to gather the leadership team in the conference room. 10 minutes later, the core NovaPay executives, heads of marketing, Technology, finance, customer support, and human resources sat around the long table. Danielle stood at the head. "As you know," she began, "I've been in talks with Crestcore Bank for a $2 billion credit line. We had a successful meeting, and I expected a contract today. Instead, they declined without explanation." She paused, letting the news sink in. A murmur went around the table. The head of finance, Maria, spoke first. "This is a major setback. Our cash runway depends on that funding. Without it, we face hiring freezes and project delays." The technology lead, Omar, looked worried. "We have critical server upgrades scheduled. If we don't get funds, our system could struggle under the load of new users." The marketing head, Carla, spoke softly. "We already teased our community about the new markets. They'll be disappointed. We need a communication plan." Danielle met each person's eyes. "I understand the impact. That decision is painful. But we will not let it define us. We have strong revenue streams, loyal customers, and a clear vision. We also have alternative lenders, but they come at a higher cost. We will convene tomorrow with our finance partners and map out Plan B. But tonight, I want each of you to remember why you joined NovaPay. To make payments fair and easy for people everywhere. Our mission matters more than one bank's rejection." There was silence, then a nod of agreement. The team looked weary, but determination lay under their brows. They knew Danielle to be steady in crisis. After the meeting, Danielle returned to her office. She picked up her CEO badge, the same badge Mark had tossed on the bank floor. She held it in her hand and thought about respect. At Crestcore, respect had been missing twice. In the lobby and in that curt email. Yet here, with her team, respect and trust were alive. She tucked the badge into her bag and organized her desk. That evening, she drafted letters to 3 alternative lenders, detailing NovaPay's strengths and her firm request for financing. She reshaped the press release to focus on continued growth despite challenges. She reviewed her notes for the investor call the next morning. As she worked, she felt the familiar pulse of purpose returning. She would not let silence defeat her before leaving the office. Danielle walked through the open plan workspace. Engineers sat at monitors. Customer support agents answered calls and marketers drafted social posts. Each person greeted her with a nod or a wave. She stopped by James's desk. "Thank you for your support today," she said. He smiled and said, "We've got this. Tomorrow we'll have a clear path." She stepped outside into the cool evening air. The city lights glimmered as dusk settled. She closed her eyes and breathed in the promise of tomorrow. Crestcore's silence had stung, but it had also reminded her of NovaPay's resilience. She was no longer waiting for someone else's respect. She would command her own future and make sure no one could throw her dignity aside again. As she walked home under amber streetlights, Danielle imagined the next chapter. A new partnership, perhaps multiple partners, each chosen not just for capital but for shared values. She thought of the messages she would send to her team in the morning. Reminders of their strength, their unity, and their purpose. The silence of Crestcore would not echo in NovaPay's halls. Instead, it would become a quiet lesson in self-respect and resolve. And in that lesson lay the true power to shape a future no one could ignore. Danielle woke the next morning before her alarm and lay still for a moment, gathering her thoughts. The sky outside was pale with dawn. She knew today would be different from any other. Crestcore's silent refusal still hung in the air, but she refused to let it define NovaPay's future. With a clear mind, she rose and followed her usual morning ritual. A cup of green tea in her sunlit kitchen, a moment of quiet reflection as she watched the steam curl upward, and a glance at the whiteboard where she had sketched new milestones. Today, Those milestones would shift, but they would not disappear. At 8 o'clock, Danielle arrived at the NovaPay offices and found her leadership team already assembled in the conference room. She carried a fresh pot of coffee and placed it on the table. Carla, the marketing director, poured cups for everyone, her steady hands betraying none of the stress she felt. Danielle welcomed each leader with a warm nod before taking her place at the head of the table. The room fell silent as she opened her laptop and brought up the revised plan. "Good morning," she said, her voice calm but determined. "Yesterday, we faced a setback with Crestcore. They declined to move forward without explanation. That decision hurt and surprised me. That today is about what we do next." She clicked to a slide that listed alternative lenders and potential partners. "I've spoken with 3 other banks and 2 venture partners. Their interest is real, and their terms, while different, still allow us to move forward. We will evaluate each option by midday and choose the best path." She paused and looked around the table. "I need your insights and your commitment. We will not shrink our vision. We will adapt." Maria, head of finance, leaned forward. "I reviewed each offer. Bank A can provide $1.2 billion at a slightly higher interest rate, but with fewer collateral demands. Bank B offers $800 million, but includes marketing support. The venture partners are willing to invest $500 million in equity. We could combine options to approach our original goal." She spoke clearly, her expertise evident in her calm tone. Omar, leading technology, chimed in. "I'll adjust our deployment schedule. We can scale our server upgrades in phases based on funding flow. It might slow us a bit in the second quarter, but we can maintain uptime and service quality." He tapped his pen on the table thoughtfully. "Our customers won't notice if we communicate transparently." Carla nodded. "From a marketing perspective, we can frame this pivot as an example of NovaPay's resilience. Our brand thrives on overcoming obstacles for our customers. If we share this story, how we stood up for respect and refused to compromise on our values, it could strengthen loyalty and attract new users." James, the chief operating officer, added, "I'll coordinate with our legal and finance teams to finalize terms quickly. Let's aim to sign an agreement by the end of the week. I've already scheduled calls with each lender for later today." Danielle felt a swell of pride. Each leader had stepped up, offering solutions rather than doubts. She closed her laptop. "Thank you. Let's move forward with Bank A and one of the venture partners. Carla, draft an announcement to employees explaining our new plan and emphasizing our mission. Omar, update the timeline. Maria, prepare the final offer package. James, lead the negotiations. I trust each of you." She smiled. "Let's show Crestcore and the world how NovaPay turns challenges into momentum." After the meeting, Danielle retreated to her office and drafted the internal memo. She wrote in clear, simple language, "NovaPay will secure new funding by Friday. Our commitment to fair, respectful service remains unchanged. We face setbacks but never quit." She paused, then added, "Thank you for your dedication. Together, we build a better future." She sent the memo and watched as read receipts appeared on her screen. Messages of support flooded in. "Proud to be part of this team. Let's do it. NovaPay strong." By mid-morning, Danielle was on calls with potential partners. Bank A's representative, Ms. Chen, spoke with warmth and efficiency. She respected NovaPay's insistence on dignity and shared her own story of rising through a male-dominated banking world. They found common ground in values. The venture partner, Mr. Patel, offered equity investment and marketing collaboration, excited by NovaPay's brand story of resilience. Danielle listened, asked questions, and negotiated terms that balanced capital needs with long-term vision. At noon, she joined the leadership team for a quick update. Maria reported that Bank A and the venture partner had each sent draft term sheets. Omar showed a revised timeline on the whiteboard. Carla presented sample social media posts that highlighted NovaPay's commitment to respect and progress. Danielle felt energy buzzing through the room. The sting of Crestcore's silence was no longer at the forefront. Instead, the table was filled with possibility. After lunch, Danielle walked through the open plan office. She paused by a group of engineers reviewing code on screens. "How are things?" she asked. They looked up and smiled. "Good. One said, "We're ready to roll. We'll scale as soon as we get the first tranche." She thanked them and moved on, noticing how the simple act of presence lifted morale. Respect flowed two ways, from leader to team and back again. Back in her office, Danielle drafted a short press release. She chose to share the news widely. NovaPay secures new $1.7 billion funding package from two leading partners to drive global expansion. She emphasized that NovaPay remains focused on dignity and inclusion for all client traits that set the company apart. She asked Carla to review it and prepare distribution channels. Before the afternoon ended, Danielle joined a live video interview with the Business News Network. The host asked about the setback with Crestcore. Danielle answered honestly. "We faced a moment of disappointment when a longtime banking partner chose silence over dialogue. But our values demand action. We sought partners who share our commitment to respect and transparency, and we found them. This experience reminded us that principles guide growth." She spoke calmly, her words carrying conviction that resonated with viewers. The next few hours flew by in a blur of calls, document reviews, and strategy sessions. James called to say that both partners had signed term sheets. Danielle exhaled in relief. She thanked him and reminded him to coordinate with finance for fund transfers early next week. She then sent a final note to the team. "We did it. Funding secured. Thank you for rising to the challenge. Today we showed the power of unity and purpose." That evening, Danielle left the office later than usual. The city lights gleamed as she walked to her car. She felt tired but invigorated. Crestcore's silence had led to a stronger outcome. She thought of how holding fast to her values, not compromising on respect, had guided every decision. She thought of her team's loyalty, her partner's shared vision, and the customers who believed in NovaPay's mission. At home, she poured a quiet glass of water and sat by her window. She looked up at the sky, where stars blinked against the dark. She allowed herself a moment of rest. Tomorrow, she would announce the funding to the world. She would celebrate with her team, and then turn her gaze to the next horizon. But tonight, she simply reflected on the day's journey. How adversity had tested them, how unity had carried them, and how respect once denied had become the foundation for stronger partnerships. With a sense of deep satisfaction, Danielle closed her eyes. She knew the final part of her story awaited. How NovaPay's journey inspired others and reshaped industry norms. But for now, she rested, confident that respect and integrity would continue to light the path ahead. Danielle woke early with a mix of relief and excitement buzzing through her. Yesterday's news had spread quickly. NovaPay's announcement of its new $1.7 billion funding package was already making headlines. She could feel the momentum building even before her first cup of coffee. As she dressed for the day, she thought of how far she and her team had come from that moment in the bank lobby, when her ID hit the floor, to this bright morning when respect and partnership had triumphed. When she reached the NovaPay office, the lobby hummed with energy. Staff gathered around screens showing news articles praising NovaPay's resilience and values. A headline on one site read, "NovaPay stands strong. How ACEO's resolve turned rejection into opportunity." Another post quoted a customer, "I trust a company that won't settle for silence over respect." Danielle walked through the crowd, nodding and smiling. Each greeting she received felt like a warm acknowledgement of the journey they had shared. In her office, a stack of congratulations emails awaited her messages from partners, investors and colleagues she had never even met but whose support now warmed her heart. She replied with brief, personal notes. "Thank you, it means a lot, let's keep building." Then she opened a folder on her desk marked Media Requests. Interviews, podcasts, and panels invited her to share NovaPay's story. She realized this moment was more than a financial win. It was a chance to teach the industry that dignity cannot be an afterthought. Her first meeting of the day was with Carla and the marketing team. They gathered around a screen as she entered. "Good morning," Danielle said. "I'm thrilled by the response so far. Let's make sure our message stays clear." Carla brought up the campaign drafts, social media posts, blog articles, and a short video featuring Danielle recounting her experience with Crestcore and the lessons learned. The video showed gentle footage of NovaPay's offices, staff collaborating, and families happily sending money to loved ones abroad. Danielle's voiceover spoke directly to the camera. "When someone tosses your work aside, you have two choices. You can accept it or you can stand up. We chose to stand up, and we found partners who stand with us in respect." Danielle watched the draft and nodded. She appreciated how the video balanced emotion with optimism. "Let's finish editing this today and schedule the release for midday," she said. "We want everyone to see that a company's true strength lies in its values." Carla smiled and the team got to work. Next, Danielle met with the finance group to finalize the transfer plan. Maria and her team walked her through the schedule of drawdowns, interest payments, and collateral arrangements. They also discussed how to manage the higher rate on Bank A's line and how the venture partner's equity stake would shape future decisions. Danielle asked questions, made suggestions, and thanked them for their thorough work. When the meeting ended, she felt confident that NovaPay's finances were in safe hands. Later, Danielle joined a video call with NovaPay's overseas partners. Faces from India, Brazil, and South Africa appeared on her screen. Each partner expressed joy at the news. One manager said, "This funding means better service for our community and new jobs for local talent." Another added, "Your story inspired our team. We believe in doing business with companies that respect people." Danielle sighed, "Thank you. Your trust made this possible. Together, we will bring fair, fast payments to millions more." In the afternoon, Danielle finally had a quiet moment alone in her office. She sat at her desk and opened a journal she kept for moments of reflection. She wrote a few sentences about the journey, the early days of NovaPay, the hope that kept her going, the moment of disrespect that became a catalyst for change, and the triumph of finding partners who shared her values. As she wrote, she felt the weight of gratitude. She was proud of her team's resilience and of the industry's willingness to learn. Her door opened, and James stepped in with 2 slices of homemade lemon cake. "Thought you might need a treat," he said with a grin. Danielle laughed a genuine, carefree laugh. "You know me too well," she replied. They shared cake and coffee, talking about upcoming projects and dreaming aloud of future expansions. James reminded her to rest that evening. She had earned it. Danielle nodded, grateful for his support. Before leaving for the day, Danielle went to the open workspace. She found her team gathered around a large conference table, ready for a small celebration. Balloons and NovaPay's teal and white floated near the ceiling. A banner read, "Together we rise." The staff cheered as she entered, and Carla handed her a glass of sparkling cider. Danielle felt her eyes warm. She raised her glass. "To every one of you," she said. "Thank you for standing with our values. This success is yours as much as mine." The room cheered again. After the celebration, as the sun dipped toward the horizon, Danielle walked home reflecting on the broader impact of their story. She imagined the other CEOs who had faced subtle slights or overt disrespect in boardrooms and lobbies. She hoped her example would give them courage to speak up. She thought about the customers whose trust she had honored and the communities her company served. She realized that business was more than profit. It was a force for dignity and empowerment. At home, she prepared a simple dinner and poured herself a cup of chamomile tea. She sat by the window, watching lights flicker in nearby buildings. She thought of tomorrow's plans: interviewing on a major podcast, meeting with new potential partners, and finalizing the marketing rollout. But for now, she let herself rest in the quiet of Heartwarming. The soft hum of the city reminded her that life carried on, full of challenges and opportunities. As she settled on the couch, she held her CEO badge, the same one Mark had thrown on the bank floor. She ran her fingers over its smooth metal surface and whispered, "Thank you." That moment of disrespect had sparked her resolve. It had reminded her that her worth was not determined by others' actions, but by how she chose to respond. With that thought, she closed her eyes. She saw the next chapter of NovaPay unfolding. New markets, new stories, and new partnerships built on mutual respect. She felt a calm certainty that her company would continue to grow, not just in revenue, but in reputation and impact. She had learned that silence in the face of disrespect was never an option, and that speaking up could open doors to even greater possibilities. As sleep gently claimed her, Danielle held on to one clear promise. She would always stand for respect, for herself and for everyone NovaPay served. And in that promise lived the true power of her story, a power that no obstacle could ever silence.